Oil, this is really coincidental. Just as I arrived here with some business after our encounter at the banquet, this girl straightforwardly rejected this solemn and grave guy. I thought we wouldn't meet again, but here we are. Boas could only chuckle awkwardly. Indeed, what a coincidence. Being broke and criticized by these market folks is already embarrassing enough. Now, to top it off, running into the second prince here, the damage is at least 1,000 times worse. This is a situation where even wearing 10 pairs of pants won't erase the humiliation. But I'm not that destitute to use Duck's money. She straightforwardly told him, "Your Highness, thanks for the offer, but I don't need you to pay the deposit for me. I appreciate it, but I'll handle it myself." Noticing Os's determination, the second prince wore a perplexed expression and gently asked, "Why did you reject me back then, Miss Os? We could have become friends first." Os quickly responded with a smile, "Your Highness, I'm grateful for the offer, but making friends with a prince like you would indeed be a blessing for me. However, externally, I'll maintain a cheerful demeanor. Internally, I'll keep cursing Duck for not choosing someone more outstanding than me. Why does he have to meddle with me?" The casual and indifferent attitude of the girl only heightened Duck's curiosity. He remained intrigued, contemplating how he could help Os in her most difficult times, thus ensuring her eternal gratitude. However, Os paid no attention to Duck's attempts to show kindness. She confidently challenged the pastry chefs around her, stating that if any of them wanted to leave for another employer, she wouldn't stop them. The notable Ander, a top pastry chef in the empire, was set to work at her shop. Jao and the others were skeptical of Os' claims, questioning her ability to invite Ander without money or connections. Despite the doubts, Os stood her ground, and even Jao's sister continued to express her support. Jao, however, wondered why Os didn't seek help from the nobleman. She dismissed his concerns, saying, "I'm just a small supporting character. Why would I involve myself in the complicated and inexplicable plot? I am not in the position to do so. I'm just here to make pastries." The confident plan outlined by Os threw the pastry chefs into confusion, and even Duck began to doubt her words. The manager, alarmed, questioned the legitimacy of her claims, but Os remained resolute. She challenged them to check if Ander would really come to her shop, insisting on not accepting the deposit. The manager, fearing a loss of control, felt the situation slipping out of his hands. As the drama unfolded, Duck found himself at the mercy of Os' determined and resourceful nature. His attempts to offer help were gracefully declined, leaving him bewildered. Os, determined and confident, set her plan in motion, creating a buzz among the pastry chefs and keeping everyone guessing about Ander's involvement. "Leon, this woman, how many hidden cards does she have that I don't know about?" Facing the questioning and curiosity of the manager. "And those bakers," Os confidently declared in a loud voice, "Of course I have evidence. In 5 days, I will invite Mr. Ander to the handicraft fair to meet everyone. By then, I will also pay the deposit in full. Please don't worry." After making a fierce confrontation at the last fair, Oil and Jao left. On the way back, Jao couldn't resist his curiosity and asked her why the young miss lied about that. 5 days later, if Mr. Ander cannot appear, all these fabrications will be exposed. It will damage the reputation of the VIA family, but Jao, stern as he was, Os was not discouraged. On the contrary, she felt happy. "Why are you worrying about me?" Suddenly, Os looked in another direction, reminding her owner that making the right decision is my responsibility as a knight. Anyway, I'll persist and not admit defeat. But that's enough. It's enough to make her feel warm. Her little wolf, pretending to be arrogant, but obviously concerned for herself, She couldn't help but smile brightly. Then she reassured the young man. "Rest assured, I won't do anything uncertain. If I dared to say that, I'm sure I can find a way to invite him." Actually, OS can be so confident for a reason. In the original story, Mr. Nder's wife passed away early, and he raised 2 children on his own. Unexpectedly, one day, both children disappeared. Due to this reason, Ander went mad, neglecting wealth and spending his days searching for his children. Later, the female lead, Kalya, found his 2 children for him, so she could invite Ander down the mountain to make a birthday cake for the princess. Although this time, the OS doesn't know how Kalya persuaded Ander, but she's sure it won't be the same as the original story, because Ander's external pulse, that Kaya feeling, would be true. And how would it feel to have both eligible bachelors, full of criteria for a golden prince, a house in the city, and a father pursuing, all after her? If you want to know, just look at our female lead. Others can only dream. But she keeps refusing both the prince and the second prince. However, both the prince and the second prince don't let her go. Just the day before, meeting the second prince at the fair was embarrassing enough. But today, she had to reluctantly welcome a guest, especially Prince Destined. It turns out that Prince Destined came here to exchange with her about the supply process for the royal family, as well as inquire about her material requirements. In general, it was a work-related visit. But whether the visitor wants to talk about work or not is another story. OS was a bit surprised that a minor matter like this brought the Prince of the Empire here in person. Could it be that he cares too much? But she responded casually, "If the prince has sent someone, that's enough." Unexpectedly, the prince didn't bother with formalities, and he immediately expressed his concern. He heard that she had some trouble at the handicraft fair yesterday. It turned out that he came all the way here for this reason. OS, who missed her sister too much, went to find her herself and even pretended to be her. OS smiled casually, thinking it was just a small matter that the girl had already resolved, but she couldn't help but admire the male lead at this point. Wow, his information is really quick. How many eyes and ears has he arranged in the empire? But she still politely declined the prince's offer, thanking him for his concern, but she doesn't need help for now. Now, talking to her brother Duke Ka, she doesn't even need to mention outsiders like the prince. She smiled, thanked the prince for his concern, but she doesn't need help for now. But now, talking to her brother Duke Ka, she doesn't even need to mention outsiders like the prince. She smiled, thanked the prince for his concern, but she doesn't need help for now. But now, talking to her brother Duke Ka, she doesn't even need to mention outsiders like the prince. She smiled, thanked the prince for his concern, but she doesn't need help for now. But now, talking to her brother Duke Ka, she doesn't even need to mention outsiders like the prince. She smiled, thanked the prince for his concern, but she doesn't need help for now. But now, talking to her brother Duke Ka, she doesn't even need to mention outsiders like the prince. She smiled, thanked the prince for his concern, but she doesn't need help for now. But now, talking to her brother Duke Ka, she doesn't even need to mention outsiders like the prince. She smiled, thanked the prince for his concern, but she doesn't need help for now. But now, talking to her brother Duke Ka, she doesn't even need to mention outsiders like the prince. She smiled, thanked the prince for his concern, but she doesn't need help for now. But she doesn't need. OS didn't mind confirming the information for him. Indeed, he is the person that Miss Kalya invited to make a cake for Princess Gqen. Hearing this, the prince became even more suspicious. He straightforwardly said, That person can't even get an invitation to the royal family. How could she possibly invite him? If she lacks staff, he can help. At this moment, the prince showed a hint of disdain, thinking that the noble young lady had been pampered since childhood, never really engaged in business, and didn't know the difficulties of running a business, just having fanciful thoughts. He thought that OS would finally give in and accept his help. But unexpectedly, she firmly slammed her hand on the table, then actively approached him seriously, saying, "Not necessarily Mr. Ander. No one else is allowed." In the prince's mind, it was like a mess of balloons. He couldn't understand why OS insisted on that Mr. Ander. However, OS's reason was very convincing. She believed that the snack industry in the empire was monopolized by the noble class, with exorbitant prices controlled by them. All the profits went into the pockets of the aristocrats. If she opened a common bakery now, it would undoubtedly affect the interests of some people, and she would likely face oppression from them. To resist them, she needed a reputable and fearless baker. Mr. Ander was the most suitable candidate. With such a sharp argument, even the prince had to nod in admiration. He didn't expect OS to think about these issues. The source of materials flowing into the common market of the aristocracy could easily lead to rebellion. In the end, OS won a very convincing victory over DEN. Now, no one dared to speak up against her anymore. Even the prince praised her. DEN, however, looked at Oil with teary eyes. Before, she had advised him to defeat the country of Leon. Initially, he thought it was because the Duke VIA was backing her up, and her goal was to become the queen, so she intentionally approached him. But now, he couldn't deny that OS' mind was quite clever. But with such intelligence, why did she tarnish her reputation before? Even though he agreed with OS's plan now, the prince still wondered how she would invite Mr. Ander. So, he asked if she had a plan. Unexpectedly, OS didn't hesitate to respond to his question. "Everything is under my control. Today, I'm planning to visit him at his house." However, someone reminded us solemnly, even though they didn't know where she got her confidence, they had to remind her that Duke Villiers had ordered him to help her open a store and monitor her every move. OS blinked her innocent eyes at the prince, as if wondering why he suddenly said such things. Sighing inside, she cursed the prince in her mind. "Prince, can you stay away from me a bit?" With the decision made, the prince prepared to leave, prompting OS not to delay the matter. "Let's go quickly." But OS couldn't go without her hands. She hastily stopped the prince and waited a bit. "We also need to bring 2 key characters." After that, she transformed into Thuck and took out the bell, shaking it lightly, producing 2 soft sounds. This was the signal between her and CHU. As soon as they heard the bell, CHU immediately appeared. She politely asked, "What task do you have for me, miss?" Interestingly, suddenly, OS asked about Shihu's recent situation. Mentioning her obedient younger brother, Shihu's eyes lit up visibly. "Thank you for caring, miss. Tua is very healthy. Every day he eats well and sleeps soundly. And with the night, he is learning swordsmanship. He asked me to tell you that he misses you a lot." After CHU finished speaking, OS enthusiastically requested, "Now please bring the boy here. I want both of you to go with me on a trip." The sky was clear with drifting clouds, accompanied by the singing of birds. Adding to the scene, 2 figures moved gracefully, each with their own charm. At the residence of Mr. Ander, it was always bustling. A long line of people stretched from one end of the neighborhood to the other, resembling a festive gathering. Those in the queue had waited for quite some time, and some were getting impatient, shouting loudly to be allowed inside. Meanwhile, OS and her group arrived just in time, witnessing the chaotic scene that took her by surprise. She never expected such a crowded situation at Mr. Anda's doorstep. There's a saying that goes, "Not afraid of strong enemies, only afraid of foolish allies." Although they didn't know how strong the opponents in the line were, even before entering, the prince scornfully looked at Oyef, mocking her for being in the same line as the common people. As expected, the prince was already expressing his disdain before even meeting Mr. Anda. He commented on how she couldn't even get inside the gate, let alone being eliminated. The mighty prince of the empire found it ridiculous to queue alongside commoners. To add to the commotion, Destined, who had initially planned to stay discreet, ended up following Oyef instead. He regretted his decision to come along and chided himself for going against the Duke VA's orders. He couldn't believe he was now outside Anda's residence, standing in line like everyone else. Some in the crowd questioned why Anda didn't accept the letters of introduction from their side. Envy and resentment filled the air as they witnessed the prince being treated like everyone else, standing in line without any special privileges. As Oyef bravely pushed through the crowd to enter, she couldn't care less about the disgruntled murmurs. She was determined to get inside. Eventually, they reached the head steward of Mr. Anda's residence. Polite as always, Oyef introduced herself as OSVIA and mentioned the letter she had sent through a night the previous night. The steward's attitude changed instantly upon hearing her name. He warmly welcomed Oyef, realizing she was the young lady of the VIA family. Oyef then introduced both Chu and Tia to the steward. The steward showed great respect, bowing to both siblings. Chu and Tia, however, were bewildered by the sudden change in address, being referred to as young miss and young master. After the introduction, the steward apologized for the confusion and warmly welcomed them inside. Oyef was relieved, and the trio entered the residence, while the crowd outside continued to grumble about the unexpected turn of events. However, when it came time for the prince to enter, the elderly steward stopped him, explaining that Anda always treated everyone equally, requiring appointments and Mr. Anda's approval for entry. The prince, frustrated and embarrassed, couldn't believe he was being denied entry and openly criticized the rules of Anda's house. Inside, Oyef couldn't help but laugh at the irony of the situation. She marveled at the unexpected scene, realizing that the mighty prince, who usually looked down on others, was now being humbled right outside Anda's gate. Chu couldn't hold back. Feeling something familiar, strange, it always crept into her heart, making her feel incredibly puzzled. Chu murmured softly, "This place seems like I've been here in a dream before." The old butler gently pushed open the heavy door, then bowed and announced the stout man standing by the window. "Sir, Miss Oyef of the Duke's mansion has arrived." The man turned out to be a renowned genius baker of the empire, whose fame resonated far and wide. Upon hearing the butler's words, he eagerly turned to look at them. Oyef didn't prolong the formalities. She directly ignored the greetings and pushed Chu and Tia forward. In the astonishment of Chu and the bewilderment of Tia, she cheerfully introduced, "Mr. Anda, I've brought your children." The two sisters still didn't understand the intentions of the young lady. Early in the morning, she called them out, then led them to meet the famous Mr. Anda. Not only that, this place made Chu feel incredibly familiar. Then there was the strange attitude of the butler, all of which added more question marks to their heads. Seeing Chu still bewildered, Oyef gently whispered in her ear, "Chu Tia, Mr. Anda. He is our long-lost father, as I just mentioned." As soon as she finished speaking, Chu's eyes became blurred with tears, and she had to use her hand to cover her mouth. She was afraid that if she didn't, her emotions would burst into sound. Chu trembled and called out to Mr. Ande. "Dad." In no time, both of them found themselves in their father's embrace, just like when they were little. Chu as a little girl and Tilaya with the scent of milk still on her mouth. Both would snuggle into their father's arms and call out, "Dad." The current postures of the two were now a mirror image of the past, triggering the instincts of a father. Mr. Ande looked at them and could immediately recognize his two children. He spoke with a choked voice due to his overwhelming emotions. "You are indeed my children." At this point, Chu could no longer maintain her composure, and tears streamed down her face. She even had to use her hand to cover her mouth, afraid that if she didn't, she would sob aloud. Tia, the little one, gasped in shock. Both of them just stood there, unable to move, perhaps from overwhelming joy or surprise. At this moment, Mr. Ande slowly approached them, remembering the memories when both of them were still little. Chu was just a little girl, and Tilaya at that time still had the smell of milk on her mouth. The two little ones would snuggle into his arms, calling him Dad. The current postures of the two were now a mirror image of the past, and with the father's intuition, Mr. Ande could immediately recognize his two children. He spoke with a voice already choked with emotion. "My children, you are really here." Chu, overwhelmed by her emotions, called out to Mr. Ande. "Dad." In no time, both of them found themselves in their father's tight embrace. "Our children, I've been searching for you for so long." Witnessing this tearful reunion, OS felt incredibly satisfied. Because she had read the original novel, she knew Kyuko's identity the moment she saw her. In the original work, which enjoyed tormenting the servants, when Shijiju and Tilai were adopted by Mr. Ande, the image of an evil woman became even clearer. As OS guided Chu and accepted Tilai, teaching swordsmanship to Tilai, everything she did, except for her genuine desire to give them a better life, was to change her fate in the story. And as for the injustice towards the evil woman, Hong Thi-tu, the prince, who stood behind, had to wipe his eyes again. At this moment, he had to admit that he was equally surprised. "I've considered many possibilities, but I couldn't have imagined that she would use this method to win over Mr. Ande." Someone now had a wandering mind to the point of forgetting all the criticisms he made just now. Instead, he embraced a belly full of curiosity. According to her, coming here was indeed the right choice. For OS, the most important thing was still Chu and Tiaya. In the end, the two sisters finally had a home of their own. A tearful reunion had passed, and Mr. Ande, deeply moved, expressed his gratitude to Miss OS. "To our house, you are a great benefactor. Tell me what you want as a return." And thus began the story of recruiting the renowned Mr. Ande inside and outside the empire. The next day, they proceeded to examine the materials, so OS, reluctantly, had to enter the royal palace and meet the person she least wanted to see. The young lady and the prince walked side by side on the corridor, and the prince began his introduction. "Just now, I took you to see the Duke's food storehouse. Next, I'll take you to see the supply chain," he said with a serious tone. Being received warmly like this, OS couldn't help but encourage him. "The prince has worked hard. Now, it's time for you to deal with the weapons storage nearby. Let the lady focus on the path without tripping. Isn't that right?" Having said that, she happily agreed immediately. "I'll leave the weapons storage to you. The prince can handle it. Food matters are not urgent." In no time, the two arrived at the weapons storage. The warehouse manager respectfully informed the prince that the Bion Trading Company had submitted the first order, inviting him for inspection. For some reason, When Os heard the name Bilon, she felt a strangely familiar sensation lingering. After a while, she remembered. That's right, Bilon Trading Company, a pirate trading company specialized in dealing weapons and ammunition. The Bilon Trading Company, formed by a group of ruthless pirates, gained fame through the arms and ammunition trade. The mastermind behind this trading company, which dealt in the weapons trade and held a significant amount of military intelligence from neighboring countries, was in fact opposed to the ruling power. Known for wanting to seize power through Bilon Trading Company by selling weapons and ammunition to other countries, he controlled a wealth of military data. Os, curious, picked up a sword and unsheathed it skillfully. Observing the blade inside, she couldn't help but praise its exceptional craftsmanship, truly worthy of the opposing faction's industry. Unexpectedly, before she could fully unsheathe the sword, the prince swiftly took it from her and sheathed it again. His serious gaze warned her not to touch things recklessly. Os, feeling embarrassed by the reminder, apologized, and the prince took the sword, behaving like a strict father cautioning his child about the dangers of the weapons. All the weapons here are very dangerous, and it's not good to get injured. Os found herself strangely moved by the prince's concern. It seemed he was genuinely interested in her well-being. After regaining her composure, the prince instructed the warehouse manager without any issues, and the count arranged for the troops to enter the palace. Os was surprised that the cautious prince agreed to the weapons transaction so swiftly. As part of Dinon's plan, he intended to captivate the monarch and the nobles with high-quality products, but send low-quality goods in the international trade. However, Os felt uneasy about the potential consequences. Kli, the female lead's father responsible for transporting ammunition at the port, inadvertently discovered Dinon's plot. Attempting to expose him, she was captured. In a critical moment, the prince, disregarding the danger, bravely intervened and rescued Kli, leading to the deepening of their affection. Although Os knew the main plot points of the story, she decided not to focus on the original novel anymore. Currently, she had accomplished many good deeds and earned boundless merit. She successfully reunited Mr. Ander with his daughters, gained his approval to visit her home, and was on the verge of establishing her own career. However, she struggled with the decision to either reveal Dinon's schemes and jeopardize the prince's position or stay silent and let the story unfold. Despite her initial reluctance to intervene, she found herself drawn into the situation. Late into the night, Os, exhausted, couldn't shake off the weariness in her eyes. It was evident that the source of her current distress was the prince. She sighed, contemplating her options and wondering what was going through his mind. Despite his usual cold demeanor, she couldn't understand his unpredictable reactions. As the night fell, Chu had probably returned home by now. Os could go back and reunite with her sister and father. While she was genuinely happy for them, a sense of emptiness and loneliness crept in. Remembering the times when Chu was by her side and Tia was happily practicing swordsmanship, Os felt a pang of nostalgia and loneliness that lingered in her heart. Now, only the young lady sits alone in the spacious room, isolated in the darkness. Suddenly, an unexpected hand appears in front of her, holding a large teacup with a loud voice. "Incorrect, my dear. Our little aristocrat is still here." The unexpected antagonist turns out to be Tia, a mysterious gentleman who seems to have appeared out of nowhere. He seems to read her thoughts and offers a few comforting words. Since the princess's birthday banquet, Tia has been absent, and there have been rumors that he's busy. Os, unable to resist teasing, wonders aloud about Tia's recent activities. Since the birthday banquet, they haven't met, and she thought he might have left. Tia, catching her implication, laughs and says that he's been busy. Refusing to buy into his romanticized dialogue, Os, rejects his cheesy words. However, Tuya insists that he's not the one to be feared. She is the terrifying one. To her surprise, Tuya seems to be able to understand people without any special abilities. Oyef, in disbelief, insists that Tuya is just using information scattered in novels and making educated guesses. Tuya playfully dismisses her denial and claims that she is more terrifying than him. The conversation shifts to Ander, who apparently agreed to work for Oyef after she helped him reunite lost couples. Hearing this, Oyef is shocked and wonders how Tuya knows so much. Tuya explains that he's heard about it and casually sips his tea. Tuya then brings up the topic of a potential investor interested in working with Oyef. When asked, Tuya reveals the investor's name as Oyef. Surprised, asks if it's L, one of the 3 major trade associations in the empire. Tuya confirms and praises L as an excellent investor, though his true identity remains mysterious. Despite Oyef's initial dislike for Tuya, she quickly changes her attitude and begins to inquire about Tuya. Pleased with her reaction, approaches her and gently places his hand on her head, showing apparent concern for her well-being. He advises her to rest well tonight, as he plans to introduce her to Earl the next day. Now that this person is suddenly treating me so well, Oyef feels a bit skeptical about life. Could it be that I misunderstood this person, and he is actually a good person? Tuya starts reading her thoughts and laughs, agreeing that she is correct. He adds that he is eager to see her reaction when they meet L. As per Tuya's commitment, he leads Oyef to the L Trade Association. Being one of the top 3 trade associations in the empire, the place is bustling with people. Oyef looks around, feeling like she's in a countryside fair. While Oyef is feeling disheartened, Tuya approaches the manager to arrange a meeting with L. Oyef wonders why Tuya didn't arrange the meeting beforehand. Tuya deals with the situation, and Oyef can't help but regret putting her trust in this unreliable person. As Tuya negotiates with the manager, her familiar female voice interrupts. It turns out to be Khuong, the female lead from the novel. Oyef is surprised to see her in this context and wonders why she is associated with the L Trade Association. Khuong, displaying an arrogant attitude, claims that she wasn't seeking L but was invited by him. Before leaving, she taunts Oyef, suggesting that not everyone has the fortune to meet L. Oyef is left standing there, feeling humiliated. She regrets putting her trust in Tuya, and the situation becomes more embarrassing as Khuong is invited into a private room, and Oyef is left outside. Tuya tries to comfort Oyef, but she is frustrated and angry. Inside the room, Khuong is disappointed to find that L is not present, and instead, a manager briefs her about the weapon trade of the Bil Trade Association. Khuong becomes furious, feeling deceived and humiliated. Meanwhile, Oyef expresses her discontent with Tuya, accusing him of causing them unnecessary trouble. Tuya remains nonchalant, suggesting that they should not lose hope as someone important might appear at the last minute. Oyef is increasingly frustrated with Tuya's exaggerated behavior. Oyef, feeling frustrated, pushes Tuya away and warns him to stop spreading false information. However, just as Tuya finishes speaking, the Crown Prince appears, surprising everyone. The Crown Prince is amazed to find Oyef there, wondering why she, too, was denied entry. The Crown Prince casually shares his experience of being turned away by L and jokes about it. Oyef finds herself caught in an unexpected encounter with the Crown Prince, who seems to be intrigued by her determination. He contemplates whether he should reveal his identity to her. The Crown Prince is curious about Oyef's reasons for seeking L and questions her about it. Oyef, trying to maintain her composure, explains her need for investment and mentions hearing about the Crown Prince's successful investments. However, the Crown Prince, who is secretly L, is more interested in Oyef herself. He wonders if he should tell her about his true identity, considering her impressive business plan. Tia, watching the situation, decides to leave, claiming that the presence of the Crown Prince may be more beneficial for Oyef. As Tia makes his exit, Oyef, determined to chase after him, is stopped by the Crown Prince. He suggests that she stays a bit longer, hinting at the possibility of introducing her to Oyef is surprised by the unusual warmth and enthusiasm displayed by the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince proposes to review Oyef's business plan, and Oyef declines, stating that it's a confidential matter. This refusal pleases the Crown Prince, who appreciates her sense of propriety. He teases her about fearing he might steal her business secrets. Oyef is caught off guard by the Crown Prince's unexpected interest in her small dessert shop. The Crown Prince praises her confidence and even gives her a mask, asking her to put it on. Oyef is left bewildered by the turn of events, as the Crown Prince seems to be enjoying the interaction. As the Crown Prince continues to engage with Oyef, she realizes that she underestimated the situation and that the Crown Prince might have more to offer than she initially thought. Oyef, holding the mask in her hand, is still puzzled about the Crown Prince's intentions. Before she can ask, the Crown Prince abruptly interrupts, saying that it's not convenient to talk here. Without giving her a chance to digest the information, he effortlessly grabs her hand and starts walking. Oyef looks at him curiously, feeling like a puppet being led by the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince remarks about the tendency of men in this world to appear dangerous. As they stroll along the spacious corridor, people bow respectfully, addressing the Crown Prince as the head of the association. Oyef observes the scene, wondering why the men in this world enjoy portraying themselves as dangerous figures. Once inside a large room, the Crown Prince releases Oyef's hand and comments, "We're here. What do you want to talk about?" Oyef remains steadfast, refusing to disclose her business plan to anyone other than L. The Crown Prince, still inquisitive, asks why she won't share with other potential investors. Oyef confidently explains that, in this world, investors usually focus on the background of entrepreneurs and tend to invest in wealthy nobles. However, she asserts that with thorough research, she can prove that her small dessert shop is a worthy investment. The Crown Prince is not fully convinced and questions the similarity between him and L. Oyef carefully avoids answering directly and instead praises L for being a talented individual who doesn't discriminate based on social status. As the conversation unfolds, the Crown Prince's interest in Oyef grows, and he decides to test her reaction. He subtly hints that he might be L. Oyef, shocked, takes a step back, trying to comprehend the revelation. The Crown Prince enjoys her reaction and teases her about the unexpected twist. Now face to face with the Crown Prince, Oyef is torn between the shock of finding out his true identity and her determination to stick to her principles. The Crown Prince, intrigued by her, removes his mask, asking her to do the same. Oyef, with a heavy heart, begins to reveal her business plan, navigating the challenging situation with the Crown Prince, who seems to find the whole interaction quite amusing. The atmosphere in the room becomes more intense as Oyef unveils the details of her carefully crafted business strategy. The Prince Dinon is a mysterious figure in the original story, and also the wealthy Mr. L of the Business Association. Furthermore, he is the manager of the Royal Business Association. If he invests in her, it means she has to get involved with the male lead. This is the last thing Oyef wants in her transmigration journey. She is determined to avoid the cold and aloof male lead and the dark antagonist boy. Therefore, Oyef tells the prince that she thinks it's better not to consider the business plan. The prince looks disdainfully at her, wondering why she was so confident just now, but seems worried now. He questions why she is losing confidence in her sweet shop. Oyef starts to provide reasons, stating that the prince being Mr. L is beyond her predictions. She doesn't want to rely on the power of the royal family, as it might make the emperor and her father think she lacks capability. She emphasizes that she doesn't want to get involved with him, and the prince seems to understand. The prince calmly responds, saying she doesn't need to worry because his father doesn't know that BILO Business Association is under his management. He reveals that he is Mr. L, and she is the only one in this world who knows. This revelation has an underlying meaning, indicating that he truly values her. However, he is unaware if she understands his words. Observing the prince's confident and grateful expression, OS, outwardly grateful, is internally shaken. She urges the prince to stop talking, claiming that knowing more will only hasten her demise. Before OS can maneuver the situation further, the prince bends down to inspect her business plan. OS explains that she wants to open a shop at the intersection of JGA Street, strategically located between the aristocratic industrial area and the commoner street. Hearing this, the prince comprehends her plan. She wants both classes to come and dine. He acknowledges the potential of the location and the difference in consumption habits between the two classes. OS, with confidence, asserts that her sweet shop, accessible to both aristocrats and commoners, will have no rivals, immediately attracting a large consumer base from the commoners. She also mentions ANDER, the artisan who makes cakes for both classes. The prince agrees with her approach, praising her extraordinary business plan. He expresses keen interest and asks if she can elaborate further. OS, despite being engrossed in her work, promptly responds to his question. However, before she can say more, the prince unexpectedly bends down again, and their close proximity leaves OS somewhat disconcerted. OS is equally surprised, her eyes wide open as she looks at him, filled with question marks. She wonders if this counts as kissing already, feeling like their lips are about to touch. The situation makes OS extremely embarrassed, and her face turns red. She quickly covers her mouth with her hands and tries to explain. Apologizing to the prince, OS says, "I'm sorry, Prince DNRN. I didn't mean to offend you." "Oh no, is this considered a kiss?" She stumbles over her words, and her face is now flushed with embarrassment. The teasing from the prince's sister doesn't help, making the situation even more awkward. The prince, however, seems to be more irritated. He questions OS, asking if it wasn't intentional. Then he firmly clasps his hands on the armrests of the chair, trapping OS. She feels powerless and unable to move out of his sight. The prince proceeds to say that if someone else had offended him, he would have sought revenge immediately. But for OS, he has a different demand. At this point, OS is terrified and her face turns pale. She regrets changing her principles and thinks that she might meet her end now. However, to her surprise, the prince clarifies that he wants her to pay the price by being forced into a kiss like this. Now, OS is panicking internally, thinking that the prince might be intending to kill her on the spot. She believes she has been foolish, trying to change her principles, and now it seems she's facing death. However, the prince, with a mysterious tone, assures her that he won't harm her and that he simply wants her to pay a price. Nervously, OS asks what price she needs to pay. The prince doesn't give a direct answer, but instead lightly touches her chin, making it impossible for her to look away. Then he casually mentions that he wants a kiss, implying that this is the price she has to pay. OS, in shock, can't believe that she is about to lose her first kiss to the male lead. The prince continues the second round of kissing, and this time both seem to be more experienced. OS, despite trying to maintain composure, can't help but be affected emotionally. Her heart races and she struggles to comprehend her own feelings. After the intense moment, the prince, seemingly satisfied, casually comments that this evens the score between them. He then gently strokes her head like one would with a pet. OS, in a daze, can't believe what just happened, and the prince quickly shifts the topic back to the business plan. The prince expresses interest in both the sweet shop and OS's business plan. He encourages her to consider collaboration, emphasizing that she should see him as a business partner rather than a prince. The prince, with mischievous thoughts in his mind, is already contemplating how to win her over by granting her a title, suggesting a possible future of being together. The OS calmly walked out of the luxurious party, her steps uncertain. She appeared lost in thought, looking like a completely different person now, indifferent and almost like a fallen woman. Love showed no mercy. Her heart still pounded wildly, as if it wanted to burst out of her chest, a constant throbbing that seemed ready to explode. Not only that, her swollen mouth, a result of the kiss from Prince Keo, added to the spectacle. Onlookers might have mistaken her for someone stunned by a bee, little knowing that it was the consequence of the crown prince's amorous pursuits. OS sat down in bewilderment, feeling the urge to scream at the top of her lungs. I just wanted to attract investment. Why did I have to involve myself in this mess? However, her mind couldn't suppress thoughts of the passionate kiss she had just experienced. Slapping herself a few times, she reminded herself not to be moved by the main character's revenge. She couldn't afford to be shaken. Suddenly, a commotion nearby caught her attention. A man's voice rang out, shouting, "Quick, follow me." The person in trouble with this man was none other than the female lead, Kary. She was being ruthlessly grabbed by the wrist, pleading for help from anyone around. This man, seemingly a human trafficker, resorted to using force. He slapped Kary in the face, causing her features to contort. OS, feeling a surge of anger, couldn't stand idly by. She yelled, demanding the release of Kary, but the seasoned scammers were unmoved. The situation escalated as the man accused Kary of being a thief and ordered his cronies to apprehend her. OS, shocked by the turn of events, was determined to help Kary. She boldly declared her identity as the noble princess from the Vi ducal house, hoping it would intimidate the wrongdoers. Surprisingly, the mention of her aristocratic background did make them hesitate momentarily, but the man in charge remained defiant. He brushed off her warning, claiming that he managed his own household matters, and proceeded to defame Kary further. OS, enraged by the baseless accusations, retaliated verbally. The man, however, showed no signs of backing down. He even ordered his henchmen to seize Kary. OS took a bold step forward, blocking their path. She defiantly declared that they couldn't take Kary away today. The scammers, realizing the gravity of the situation, were momentarily taken aback. Kary's fate hung in the balance, and OS, despite her lack of combat skills, was ready to confront them. As OS confronted the group, her boldness and determination managed to temporarily intimidate them. However, the situation took a dark turn when the man in charge resorted to violence, ordering his men to subdue Kary. The crowd, initially passive, watched in awe as OS tried to defend the helpless girl. Despite her efforts to appeal for help from the onlookers, the crowd remained hesitant, fearing involvement in the dangerous affair. OS continued to plead, but her calls fell on deaf ears. The man in charge, now devoid of any humanity, scoffed at OS's plea, dismissing the possibility of anyone coming to her aid. The situation became increasingly dire, and OS realized that her attempt to seek help from the crowd was futile. The man, seeing the advantage on his side, mocked OS' optimism, warning her not to expect anyone to help. The tension reached its peak, leaving OS with a sinking feeling that the outcome was uncertain. The unfolding events painted a grim picture as OS stood alone against the ruthless group, desperately hoping for a miracle. OS remained unfazed, despite her eyes showing signs of fatigue. Witnessing Kary trembling, controlled by the ruthless man, heightened the tension in OS' mind. She loudly announced to the surrounding crowd, "I remember them now. These are criminals who escaped from prison. The night squad has issued a wanted order. Catching them can earn you a reward of 2 gold coins." The mention of gold coins had an immediate effect, and the crowd, now eager for the reward, became animated. With the overwhelming support of the crowd, the scammers found themselves surrounded. OS, somewhat disgusted by the ways of the world, muttered about the power of money. Khuong, caught in the chaos, displayed a completely different demeanor from her usual refined self. Spotting Khuong amidst the tumult, OS quickly grabbed her and urged her to run. "Let's go, we need to escape." Leaving the chaotic scene behind, they ran through the bustling crowd, leaving the greedy pursuers behind. Finally reaching a quiet street with no one in sight, both OS and Khuong collapsed against a wall, gasping for breath. OS, with a hint of sarcasm, remarked, "Breathing like dogs is a real thing, huh? No deviation at all." Waiting until they regained their composure, OS expressed concern for Khuong, inquiring if she was injured during the ordeal. Khuong, seemingly unharmed, downplayed the situation, stating that she could have managed to escape even without OS's intervention. However, her facade crumbled as they both leaned against the wall, exhausted. OS, noticing Khuong's vulnerability, reassured her and asserted that she intervened for justice, not expecting any repayment. The conversation took an unexpected turn when Khuong, in an embarrassed manner, admitted that she had misunderstood OS's intentions. She believed that OS deliberately targeted her due to personal resentment. OS, amused, clarified that today's events were unplanned, and she didn't harbor any ill will towards Khuong. As they continued their conversation, OS noticed Chu's concerned expression. Chu, who had been instructed by Tiwei to escort OS to the handicraft fair, expressed worry about not finding her there. OS, not wanting to reveal the trouble she had just faced, brushed off the concern and made light of the situation. However, Chu's keen eyes spotted a deep cut on OS's hand, which she hadn't noticed herself. Realizing that she might be injured from saving Khuong, OS attempted to conceal it. Chu, disregarding her attempt, gently held her hand and insisted on treating the wound. As Chu carefully applied ointment to OS's hand, his actions were surprisingly gentle and meticulous. OS, baffled by Chu's unexpected care, found herself in a moment of vulnerability. Chu's calm demeanor and thoroughness in treating her wound left OS in awe. After the treatment, Chu, still maintaining his stoic demeanor, advised OS to avoid touching the wound for a few days. OS couldn't help but acknowledge the contrast between Chu's cold exterior and the careful attention he paid to her well-being. As they headed back to the ducal house, Chu's watchful eyes seemed to harbor a depth of concern that OS hadn't anticipated. The unexpected care from Chu left OS contemplating the intricate dynamics of their relationship. Suddenly, being treated differently by Chu made OS feel a bit awkward. The girl lowered her head slightly and murmured a thank you to Chu, but he responded sternly, stating that protecting her was his duty. He emphasized that if she got hurt outside, it would be his responsibility. The guy who had been blaming himself since earlier couldn't stop self-reproaching. Seeing the handsome guy in such a dilemma, with a troubled expression, OS couldn't help but smile sweetly. She then reached out and gently placed her hand on his head, patting him as if he were a little puppy, praising Chu for doing well. "You've done a great job. On the surface, you look so composed, but I wonder if someone is secretly celebrating like crazy now." Touching the small wolf's head felt surprisingly pleasant, and being touched by the young lady without any apparent reason made Si-yu feel embarrassed to the point where he couldn't look directly at her. He turned away, starting to grumble again, emphasizing that in the future, when he's not around, the young lady should be careful. The situation was quite unique, as the girl was scolded, yet she still responded with a bright smile, meeting Chu's demands happily. It seemed that her mind had soared to the clouds just because she had taken the initiative to put her hand on Chu's head, and he showed no signs of rejecting her. Later, Boaz and Chu sat down to relax and enjoy some tea while watching the girl use her hands to carefully bandage the injured guy. The tea competition was about to begin, and the young lady asked how they were preparing for it. The guy promptly responded, mentioning that the knight's team was intensively training, and everyone was eager to represent the team in the swordsmanship competition. The swordsmanship competition, held every 4 years, was a significant event. Each noble family selected their outstanding knights to compete for the championship, showcasing their family's strength. The distinguished knight who won would receive a medal from the king, gain territory, and have their status elevated from commoner to noble. Boaz genuinely wanted Chu to participate, encouraging him to represent the knight's team and become the ultimate winner, changing his destiny. However, unexpectedly, Chu seemed a bit melancholic and told her that if he became the final winner, he would have to leave the noble mansion. Oyef was puzzled by his strange attitude, as it contradicted his original intention to use her to revive his family. Despite achieving his goal, he seemed neither happy nor satisfied. The teacher had spoken about freedom, and even Oyef expressed a joy for Chu, but he didn't seem to welcome the idea. Chu abruptly stood up, telling Oyef that she seemed to eagerly want him to leave soon. Oyef was surprised by his peculiar behavior, and he left with a parting remark, warning her to rest early. In Chu's mind, she had become a heartless woman, and he left her standing there, not understanding why everything had suddenly turned calm, and then took an unexpected turn. The little wild wolf's attitude had changed again. Oyef, with her chin resting on her hand, wondered why he acted like that. She questioned herself, did I say something wrong? The sky had turned into night without her noticing. Though it was late, the lights in the palace of the second prince were still brightly lit. The owner of the palace, the second prince, was in such a rage that he slammed the table with a loud bang. He was so furious that he even cursed the fools around him. The subordinates were terrified by the second prince's anger. They had thrown those useless guys into the sea for the sea monsters to feed on, ensuring that the second prince's secret would never be revealed. The atmosphere was tense, and the underlings were fearful of the second prince's wrath. Before the furious outburst, they had delivered the goods as scheduled during the trade meeting today. However, Oyef had unexpectedly delayed the handover, checking the goods again because they seemed suspicious. The second prince was infuriated, connecting this to Oyef's visit to the weapon storage yesterday. His deep-seated anger surfaced as he blamed Oyef for any problem that occurred. His anger was palpable, and the subordinates were on edge. He stopped his tirade for a moment, his eyes filled with a fierce air as he looked at his subordinates. The second prince's mind was filled with resentment, blaming Oyef for any issue that arose. He couldn't stand it any longer, and his rage erupted again. The subordinates cowered, realizing they had to be cautious and quick in executing his orders. Meanwhile, Oyef had postponed the handover of the goods for a reason. She sensed something unusual. The second prince's anger only fueled her determination to uncover the truth and stop whatever nefarious plans were in motion.